I got back from deployment early. My roommate froze and said, "You weren't supposed to see this." I still remember the sound of the key turning in the lock. Not because it was loud, because it was the exact moment my life split into two different stories. After 8 months overseas, countless sleepless nights, and more close calls than I wanted to admit, all I wanted was to surprise the one person who had kept my apartment alive while I was gone. My roommate, Emma, had no idea I was coming home 3 weeks early. I imagined she'd scream, laugh, maybe hug me so hard she'd crack a rib. Instead, when I opened the apartment door, she froze. Her face drained of color. And the first words out of her mouth weren't, "You're home." They were, "You weren't supposed to see this." For a second, I thought I had walked into the wrong apartment. Boxes were scattered across the living room. Pictures covered the coffee table. My old army duffel bag, the one I'd left in the closet before deployment, was wide open. Emma stood in front of it like she was guarding a secret. "What happened?" I asked, dropping my backpack. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. "Jake." I smiled. Surprise. She didn't smile back. Instead she whispered, "You're early." She stopped herself. "You thought what?" Her eyes filled with panic. I wasn't ready. I glanced around again. Nothing looked broken. Nothing looked stolen. But something felt wrong. My heartbeat slowed into that calm rhythm soldiers learn before trouble begins. "What is it?" I asked quietly. She swallowed. "I can explain." Those 4 words almost always mean the explanation will hurt. Emma and I had been roommates for nearly 3 years. People constantly assumed we were dating. We weren't. Not officially. She worked as a trauma nurse. I served in the army. Our schedules barely overlapped, but somehow we'd built a strange little family together. Movie nights, shared groceries, birthday dinners, arguments over whose turn it was to buy toilet paper. Simple things. She had become home. Before deployment, I'd almost told her how I felt. Almost. Instead, I'd hugged her goodbye. She'd cried. I'd pretended not to notice. Now she stood in front of me like I was the last person she wanted to see. "What did you find?" I asked. "I didn't find anything." "Then why are my things out?" She closed her eyes. "I was looking for something." "What?" My answer. That confused me even more. My answer to what? She took a shaky breath. "Whether I should tell you." I stepped closer. "Tell me what?" She looked straight into my eyes. "I love you." Silence. Not because I didn't know what to say, because those words were the last thing I'd expected. She laughed nervously. I knew this was a mistake. She started shoving everything back into the duffel bag. "I'll clean this up." "You don't have to." "I invaded your privacy. I had no right." "I'll move out." "Emma." She kept talking faster. "I already found another apartment." "You what?" "I signed the paperwork yesterday." Every sentence hit harder than the last. "Why?" She finally stopped moving. "Because I couldn't keep pretending." She reached into my bag and pulled out a small notebook. "I found this." Recognition hit me instantly. My deployment journal. She held it carefully, almost like it was fragile. I wasn't trying to read it, but it fell open. I saw my name. She handed it to me. A bookmark sat halfway through. I flipped to the page. There it was, my own handwriting. "If I don't make it home, someone should probably tell Emma she's been the best part of my life." I stared at the words. I'd written them after losing 2 friends during a convoy attack. Back then, it had felt easier to write the truth than say it. Emma spoke softly. "I only read that page. I swear." I closed it immediately. But after that, she smiled sadly. I couldn't stop wondering. Wondering what? If you really meant it. I laughed once. A tired laugh. I wrote that after 48 hours without sleep. So maybe I was emotional. She nodded. I figured. And I decided I couldn't spend the rest of my life wondering. So I packed. You packed because you loved me? No. She wiped her eyes. I packed because I couldn't live with someone who might never love me back. That hurt more than any explosion I'd survived overseas. Because she'd been carrying that alone. For months. Maybe years. I sat on the couch. Everything suddenly felt heavier. She stood across from me, waiting for rejection. Instead, I asked, "Did you really sign another lease?" She nodded. "Move-in is next week." I rubbed my face. "You really planned to disappear?" I thought it'd be easier. For who? For both of us. I looked at her. Really looked. Dark circles under her eyes. Stress. Fear. Hope she'd buried too many times. Then I remembered every phone call during deployment. Every time she answered immediately. Every care package. Every letter. Every ridiculous joke she'd written just to make me smile. How had I missed it? No, a better question. How had I ignored it? "You know why I never said anything?" I asked. She shook her head. "I was afraid." She blinked. "You? I've watched people lose everything overnight. I kept telling myself I'd confess after deployment. But then deployment kept getting extended. So I waited. And waited. I convinced myself there would always be another chance." She whispered, "There isn't always." "I know." We sat in silence. Outside, rain began tapping against the windows. The apartment suddenly felt very small. Very quiet. Finally, I stood. Walked toward her. Stopped only inches away. I meant every word in that journal. She looked up carefully. "Even that page?" "Especially that page." "You really?" "I've loved you for longer than I should admit." She laughed through tears. "You idiot." "I know. You absolute idiot." "Guilty." She shook her head. "I spent months convincing myself I'd imagined everything. I spent months convincing myself you deserved someone who wasn't constantly worried you'd get a phone call from the army. I thought you deserved peace. I didn't want peace. I wanted home. And home was always you." She covered her mouth. Then she hit my shoulder. Not hard, just enough. That was for making me wait. I deserved that. She hit me again. And that was for writing it in a journal instead of telling me. Fair. Then she wrapped her arms around me. This hug was different from every goodbye we'd ever shared. This one didn't feel temporary. She buried her face against my chest. "I thought I'd lost you. I almost lost you." Her voice broke. "They told us your unit had been attacked." My stomach tightened. "They called me because I was your emergency contact. I'd never known. They couldn't tell me much. I waited 12 hours before anyone confirmed you were alive. 12 hours. I'd been unconscious in a field hospital. She'd been sitting alone with unanswered questions. "I'm sorry." She shook her head. "No. I'm just glad you're here." Neither of us moved. Minutes passed. Maybe longer. Eventually she stepped back. "I still owe you an explanation." "For what?" She smiled nervously. "The pictures." She picked up a stack from the coffee table. Every photograph was of me. Some from high school, some from deployment, some from holidays. "What are these?" She laughed. "I was making something." She opened one of the boxes. Inside was a wooden frame. Half finished. Letters carved into the top. "Welcome home." Below it, dozens of photos formed a timeline of my life. Family, friends, military, us. At the center was an empty space. "What's missing?" She smiled softly. "A picture we hadn't taken yet." I looked at the empty spot. She continued. "I wanted to fill it after you got home." I couldn't speak. She shrugged awkwardly. "Guess the surprise is ruined." I laughed. "I think I can live with that." The next week was strange, wonderful, awkward. We weren't magically experts at being a couple just because we'd admitted our feelings. Sometimes we'd both reach for the coffee pot and pull away at the same time. Sometimes we'd accidentally say roommate before correcting ourselves. Sometimes we'd simply stare at each other and laugh because neither of us could believe how much time we'd wasted. Then came Saturday, the day she was supposed to move out. The moving truck arrived anyway. The driver knocked. "I'm here for Emma Carter." She looked at me. "What do I do?" I smiled. "Let's save him some work." She walked outside, spoke with the driver. A few minutes later he drove away. No furniture loaded, no boxes moved. She came back upstairs smiling. I canceled. "You sure?" She nodded. "I think I'm already home." A year later, I finally filled the empty spot in that frame. Not with a vacation picture. Not with a holiday photo. With one taken moments after I asked Emma to marry me, in the same apartment where she'd once whispered, "You weren't supposed to see this." She laughed when I showed her the frame. "You planned this?" "For a year." She kissed my forehead. "Worth the wait." Sometimes life changes because of perfect timing. Sometimes it changes because everything goes wrong. If my deployment hadn't ended early, if I hadn't decided to surprise her, if she hadn't accidentally opened that journal, if she'd moved out 1 week earlier, we might have spent the rest of our lives believing the other person never felt the same. People often ask me what the hardest moment of deployment was. They expect stories about danger, explosions, fear. But the truth is different. The hardest moment was standing in my own apartment, looking at the woman I loved, believing I'd already come home too late. Thankfully, for once, I was exactly on time.